The rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows as I sat across from Margaret's polished mahogany desk, watching my director flip through my promotion application with practiced disinterest. 7 years of canceled holidays, missed anniversaries, and endless late nights condensed into a 40-page portfolio that Margaret barely glanced at before setting it aside like an outdated quarterly report. "I appreciate your commitment," Margaret said, adjusting her Cartier watch. "But I've reviewed your application thoroughly, and while your analytical work has been adequate, I don't believe you're positioned for senior vice president. Perhaps in another review cycle or two." Adequate. The word dropped between us like a margin call. I structured the entire Westbrook acquisition that generated $90 million in advisory fees. I personally salvaged the Hartfield pension fund when the senior team had already written it off as unrecoverable. I haven't taken a full weekend off in 5 years. But I only smiled and nodded. The practiced expression I'd perfected in investment banking. "I understand. Thank you for the feedback." "I'm glad we're aligned," Margaret replied, already checking her Bloomberg terminal. "The Paramount deal needs your attention today. They've requested additional projections before the board meeting." As I gathered my leather portfolio, Margaret was already on a call, my career disappointment already forgotten. Just another transaction in her pipeline. I walked past the corner office that should have been mine, the one with the harbor view and the crystal decanters where my name belonged. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't sad or even angry. She looked calculating. I started the engine and made 2 decisions that would change everything. I would cancel the client dinner I'd organized for this weekend, and I would stop preparing my daily market briefings. No one at the firm knew it yet, but their perfect operation was about to collapse without its invisible foundation. Before I tell you what happened next, you might be wondering why so many finance professionals feel stuck in careers where they're undervalued. If my story resonates with you, make sure to like and subscribe. I share experiences every week that might just change your professional perspective. Now, back to what happened after that meeting. My name is Victoria Chen, and until that meeting, I was the most reliable analyst at Pemberton Sterling Capital. Not the most visible or the highest compensated, but the one who kept everything running while others collected the credit and the bonuses. I'm meticulous by nature, with an almost photographic memory for financial models and deal structures. Growing up as the eldest of 4 siblings in a family business taught me to anticipate problems before they escalated, a skill that transferred perfectly to investment banking. When I joined the firm 7 years ago, I'd inherited a catastrophic situation. The previous senior associate had departed abruptly after a dispute with the partners, taking all institutional knowledge with them. No documentation, no transition notes, not even access to critical client files. The deal pipeline was in chaos. Clients were threatening to move their business, and nobody knew how to stabilize the relationships. I spent 5 months reverse engineering every transaction, staying until midnight reconstructing financial models and rebuilding client histories. I created detailed procedures for every deal process, cross-referenced, indexed, and meticulously organized. My director, Margaret, never bothered to learn these systems. Why would she when I handled everything so seamlessly? Let me tell you about Margaret. She'd arrived at Pemberton Sterling 2 years after me, recruited from a prestigious competitor with an impressive pedigree, Harvard MBA, Goldman Sachs alumni, the kind of resume that opened doors regardless of actual competence. Her first month as my director, she called a team meeting to introduce her management philosophy, spoke for 2 hours about deal optimization and client value creation. Used the phrase strategic synergy 12 times. I counted because I had nothing else to do while she wasted our market hours. Her idea of leadership was presentations. Lots of presentations. Pitch decks about pitch decks. Weekly reviews that consumed entire afternoons. One-on-ones where she'd ask about my deal pipeline and then spend the entire time discussing her vacation properties. She had a habit of presenting investment strategies in partner meetings that I'd developed and explained to her in private. Word for word sometimes. When I pointed this out once, diplomatically, she said she was just elevating my ideas to the appropriate decision makers. that I should be grateful for the exposure. She played favorites openly. Bradley got the premium mandates because they'd worked together at Goldman. Catherine got the flexible arrangements because she was married to a managing director's college roommate. Junior analysts got client-facing opportunities that senior associates had been requesting for years, and she always had an explanation. When I asked for the promotion the first time, she said I needed more client relationship experience. When I cultivated those relationships, she said I needed additional credentials. When I earned the CFA charter, she said I needed to demonstrate revenue generation. When I brought in 2 new clients, she said the timing wasn't optimal. When the timing improved, she said the partnership had other priorities, 7 times, 7 different justifications. 7 ways of saying we don't value you enough to promote you, but we value you too much to let you leave. But I believed her, every time. Because I wanted to believe that analytical excellence mattered, that delivering results counted, that eventually someone would recognize what I brought to the table. The cruelest part, she wasn't even deliberately malicious. She genuinely didn't comprehend why I was frustrated. To her, I was just a reliable resource. A machine that produced models and prevented deals from collapsing. Not a person with ambitions and a career trajectory. That's what made it sting more. I wasn't even significant enough to be deliberately overlooked. I was just invisible. "You're a natural problem solver," she'd say during my performance reviews, always followed by a modest bonus that never matched my contributions. The firm had recently secured a mandate with Paramount Industries, a major acquisition worth $200 million in advisory fees. I'd built that relationship from nothing, staying late to accommodate their CEO's schedule and learning their industry thoroughly. Margaret had attended exactly 4 meetings, mostly to claim credit during quarterly partner presentations. Each morning, I arrived at 6:30 to prepare market briefings for Margaret before her 8 a.m. partner call. Each evening, I sent comprehensive updates on all active transactions. In between, I extinguished fires before anyone noticed smoke. The morning after my rejected promotion, something shifted inside me. I arrived at exactly 9 a.m., not 6:30, not 8:15, exactly 9. My desk felt different somehow, like I was seeing it clearly for the first time. The dual Bloomberg terminals displaying market data I'd configured from scratch. The sticky notes with passwords to systems only I understood. The dying orchid I kept forgetting to water. The Tiffany clock the Hartfield family had given me after I'd saved their pension fund. The stacks of deal memos and financial projections. I opened my laptop and stared at the overnight market movements that had accumulated. Normally, I would have analyzed them before anyone else arrived, prepared the briefing notes, flagged the relevant developments. Today, I simply documented the headlines and waited. At 9:15, the first email appeared. Margaret Victoria. I didn't receive the morning briefing. Partners meeting in 45 minutes. Please advise. I typed back slowly, deliberately. Victoria, I'll prepare briefings during normal business hours, currently reviewing overnight correspondence. There was a long pause before her reply. Margaret, the Paramount projections are critical. Client expects updated numbers by noon. Victoria understood. I'll prioritize after stand-up. I could almost feel her confusion through the screen. For 7 years, I'd jumped at every urgent request. Now I was establishing boundaries. The cognitive dissonance must have been jarring. During the morning meeting, I gave my update in exactly 45 seconds. No additional context, no offers to assist with other team members' deals. Just the facts. Margaret looked at me strangely but said nothing. After the meeting, I addressed the Paramount projections. It took me 90 minutes to complete the analysis, a liquidity issue in their target subsidiary that I'd flagged 6 months ago and nobody had prioritized. I documented the findings thoroughly and moved on to my assigned transactions. Nothing more, nothing less. At 5 p.m. exactly, I closed my laptop. Victoria, Margaret called from her office. The Westbrook integration model is showing variances. Can you take a quick look before you leave? I'm sorry, but I have a commitment tonight, I replied, gathering my things. I've documented the troubleshooting methodology in the procedures manual. Section 7, Appendix 3. She looked at me like I'd spoken Mandarin. The procedures manual, I'd created it 2 years ago. Sent her the link 4 times. She'd never opened it. I walked out at 5:01. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. Every model I maintained that wasn't in my job description. Every process I'd created that nobody else understood. Every relationship I'd cultivated that kept clients loyal. Every crisis I'd resolved before anyone noticed the problem. Every weekend I'd sacrificed without acknowledgement. Every late night that went into my performance review as merely adequate. The list filled 4 pages. I stared at it for a long time. This was the invisible architecture of my contribution, the load-bearing work that nobody saw because I made it look effortless. I could resign. That's what people expected when they were undervalued. A dramatic departure. A LinkedIn post about work-life balance. A new position at a competitor. But that would be too easy for them. They'd hire a replacement. Pay them more. Probably. Never understand what they'd lost. No. I had a better idea. Instead, I would simply stop being invisible. I would only do what was explicitly assigned to me, and nothing more. No more heroics. No more going above and beyond. No more making Margaret look competent by preventing problems she didn't even know existed. Let them discover exactly how much they'd been taking for granted. I called it strategic withdrawal. Not resigning, not underperforming, just finally, for the first time in 7 years, doing exactly what I was compensated for. Nothing more, nothing less. The first week was uncomfortable. Market briefings weren't prepared until mid-morning. Models that I usually pre-validated contained errors. Client emails sat in shared inboxes while people tried to determine who should respond. I watched it happen with a strange mixture of anxiety and satisfaction. Part of me wanted to jump in, to fix things, to make everything smooth again. That was the conditioning of 7 years. But I stayed in my lane. I completed my assigned deals. I attended my meetings. I answered questions when directly asked. And I watched the systems I'd been supporting start to wobble. Margaret held 4 emergency meetings about response times. I attended each one, took notes, and offered no solutions. She'd look at me expectantly, waiting for me to volunteer. I'd look back, waiting for her to assign. The silence was educational for both of us. By the second week, the cracks were becoming visible. The Westbrook integration I'd mentioned earlier started showing significant variances. It was a known issue with their accounting treatment. I'd been manually adjusting for it for 3 years with a reconciliation I ran every Monday. Without that reconciliation, the variances accumulated. Westbrook's CFO started asking questions. Our deal team couldn't answer them because they'd never seen the issue before, because I'd never let them see it. Margaret scheduled a war room. I joined the call and listened as senior bankers spent 4 hours debugging a problem I could have resolved in 20 minutes. "Victoria, you structured this integration originally," Margaret said finally. "Any insights I've documented, the methodology and confluence?" I replied. Page 12 has a section on known reconciliation items. I'd suggest starting there. The documentation existed. It was thorough and accurate. But nobody had ever needed to read it because I'd always just handled things. Now they were reading it. Slowly, painfully. Discovering exactly how complex the deals were that I'd been maintaining alone. By week 3, the Paramount client was threatening to escalate. Their acquisition timeline was slipping because nobody was monitoring the regulatory filings I'd been tracking. Margaret called me into her office. "Victoria, we need to discuss your engagement level lately." "I've been completing all assigned transactions," I replied calmly. "My deal volume is actually higher than last quarter." "That's not what I mean. You used to go above and beyond. Now you're just doing the minimum." I thought about this for a moment. "Margaret, I've been going above and beyond for 7 years. I was told my contributions were merely adequate. So I'm recalibrating my effort to match that assessment." She stared at me, processing. Is this about the promotion? It's about alignment, I said. You told me I wasn't ready for senior vice president. I'm making sure my workload reflects vice president responsibilities. Nothing more. Victoria, you can't just stop caring about the deals you structured. I didn't stop caring. I stopped overextending. There's a difference. The conversation ended awkwardly, but something had shifted. Margaret was finally seeing the gap between what she thought she was managing and what actually kept the revenues flowing. 3 days later, I received a meeting invite from someone I'd never directly interacted with. Richard Pemberton, managing partner and co-founder. Subject line strategic discussion. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning, just the two of us. 45 minutes. That night, I barely slept. Richard's office was on the executive floor, a place I'd only visited twice during my tenure. His desk was immaculate, organized with the precision of someone who valued efficiency above all else. The walls displayed tombstones from decades of landmark transactions. He gestured for me to sit. Victoria, I've been hearing your name frequently lately, not in the way you might expect. I waited, saying nothing. Our deal execution metrics have declined by 280% in the past 3 weeks. 4 major clients have filed formal complaints. The Westbrook integration is now flagged as at risk for our largest institutional relationship. He paused, studying my face. And every investigation leads back to the same conclusion. Transactions that were running flawlessly for years are suddenly problematic. The only variable that changed is your level of involvement. I maintained eye contact. I've been completing my assigned work. I said, my performance metrics are within expectations. He smiled slightly. I'm not here to discipline you. Victoria, I'm here to understand. Because the pattern I'm seeing suggests that one vice president was single-handedly maintaining deal infrastructure worth $300 million in annual fees. And nobody noticed until she stopped. I felt something release in my chest. Finally, someone who could read the data. I've been here 7 years, I said carefully. I've been told repeatedly that I'm not ready for advancement, that my contributions are adequate. Meanwhile, I've trained 4 analysts who were promoted above me within 2 years. He nodded slowly. Tell me about the work you maintain, not the official transactions, the ones nobody knows about. So I told him about the Westbrook reconciliation methodology, about the custom tracking I'd built for Paramount's regulatory filings, about the risk management procedures I'd written and tested myself because nobody else knew they existed, about the relationships I'd built with client CFOs that kept escalations from ever reaching partner level, about the overnight shifts I'd covered when others were unavailable, about the market briefings I'd prepared at 4 a.m. because I knew the partners needed them, about the knowledge base I'd built that nobody read because they just asked me directly, about the junior analysts I'd mentored who were now managing directors at other firms because Pemberton Sterling never promoted them either. I told him about the models I ran every Monday morning before anyone else arrived, the ones that caught problems before they became crises, the ones nobody knew existed because I'd never been asked to document them. I told him about the client relationships I'd cultivated, the contacts at pension funds and family offices who knew me by name, who would prioritize our pitches because I'd built trust with them over years. I told him about the partner meetings I'd attended as a silent analytical resource, watching Margaret take credit for strategies I'd developed, watching her struggle to answer questions that I could have addressed in seconds. Staying quiet because that was my role. The invisible expert behind the visible leader. The meeting ran 3 hours instead of 45 minutes. Richard took notes the entire time. Occasionally, he'd ask clarifying questions. Sometimes he'd shake his head in what looked like disbelief. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Victoria, I'm going to be direct with you. What you've described represents a significant organizational failure, not a minor oversight, a systemic, structural failure to recognize and compensate critical talent. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the harbor. We've been systematically undervaluing a critical resource while promoting people who couldn't execute half of what you do. And the worst part, we didn't even know it. Because you made it look easy. Because you never complained. Because you just kept the deals running while everyone else took the fees for granted. He turned back to face me. I want to offer you a choice. Option 1. I can make things very uncomfortable for the people who overlooked you. Demotions, reassignments, performance improvement plans, the works. Margaret's career here would effectively be over. He paused. And option 2 is more interesting. I want to create a new role. Chief Operating Officer of Deal Execution. You would report directly to me and the management committee. Your mandate would be to identify other invisible contributors across the organization and create systems to recognize and develop them. I stared at him. This wasn't what I'd expected. I'd anticipated a confrontation, an argument, maybe an HR investigation. Not an offer that acknowledged everything I'd been carrying. What about Margaret, I asked. Margaret is going to have a very educational few months, Richard said dryly. She'll learn exactly what she should have been paying attention to. Consider it professional development. I almost laughed. Can I think about it? Take a week. But Victoria, I want you to know something. What you did, the strategic withdrawal, the calibrated reduction in effort, it was brilliant. You demonstrated your value more effectively than any pitch deck or promotion packet ever could. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop compensating for organizational failures. Let the system feel your absence. Let them understand what they were taking for granted. I walked out of that meeting in a daze. My phone was already buzzing with messages from Margaret, increasingly frantic about the Paramount situation. I ignored them. For the first time in 7 years. That wasn't my problem anymore. I took the job. The announcement went out the following Monday. Chief Operating Officer of Deal Execution, reporting directly to the Management Committee. Mandate to identify and develop hidden talent across the organization. The email hit inboxes at 8 a.m. By 8:15, my inbox was flooded with messages. Congratulations from colleagues I'd worked with for years. Questions from people who'd never spoken to me before. And one very awkward message from Margaret asking if we could speak. I scheduled the conversation for later that week. Let her sit with the discomfort for a few days. Margaret's face when we finally met was something I'll treasure forever. Not because I wanted revenge, exactly, but because for the first time, she understood what she'd lost. Victoria. I had no idea. She started. The processes you were maintaining. The work you were doing. I just didn't see it. That's the problem. Margaret, you didn't look. I know. I know that now. I've spent the last week trying to understand everything you documented, and I still can't follow half of it. How did you keep all of this running by yourself? I didn't have a choice. I said, nobody else was going to do it. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. I should have advocated for you. I should have paid attention. I should have done my job as your director. I appreciated the apology. I did. But it didn't change 7 years of being overlooked. Thank you for saying that, I replied. I hope you learned something from this experience. She nodded slowly. I learned that the people who make things look easy are usually working the hardest, and that I was too focused on client presentations to see actual performance. That was exactly right, and it was probably the most insightful thing Margaret had ever said. The first thing I did in my new role was audit every department for invisible contributors, analysts who worked late without recognition, operations staff who knew systems better than anyone documented, compliance officers who'd automated half their team's work without telling anyone, back office personnel who prevented problems that never appeared on any report. I found 43 of them in the first month. Some I knew by reputation, others I discovered by following the trail of resolved issues. Who fixed this? Who documented that? Who stays late when deals are closing? The patterns were remarkably consistent. Tenured employees with modest titles, strong technical skills, weak self-promotion abilities. Performance reviews full of phrases like reliable and consistent and always delivers. The same phrases that had appeared in my reviews for 7 years. I interviewed each of them personally, asked about their work, their aspirations, their frustrations. The stories were heartbreakingly familiar, over and over, the same theme. I do excellent work, but nobody notices. I've been passed over for promotion 4 times. My director takes credit for my analysis. I've thought about leaving, but I care too much about the clients. 27 were promoted within the quarter. 16 received formal recognition and compensation adjustments. All of them were enrolled in a leadership development program I designed specifically for people who'd been overlooked. The program had 3 components. First, visibility training, how to communicate your contributions without feeling like you're bragging. How to document your wins in ways that survive organizational memory loss. How to advocate for yourself in a culture that rewards self-promotion. Second, delegation skills. How to stop being a single point of failure. How to train others without feeling threatened. How to let go of control without letting go of quality. Third, leadership preparation. How to transition from doing the work to leading the work. How to mentor without micromanaging. How to maintain technical credibility while expanding your scope. I taught most of the sessions myself because I'd learned these lessons the hard way, and I didn't want anyone else to have to repeat my mistakes. The Westbrook integration stabilized once I documented the reconciliation methodology properly and trained a team to maintain it. No more single points of failure. No more hero culture, just well-documented processes with proper coverage. The Paramount relationship improved dramatically when I restructured the deal team model. Instead of one person who knew everything, we had a team who each knew something. Redundancy instead of reliance. Process instead of personality. Our execution metrics returned to normal levels. Actually, they improved, because now problems were caught by systems instead of by Victoria working until midnight. The firm started to feel different, not just structurally, but culturally. People began documenting their work without being asked. Teams started cross-training on critical processes. Junior analysts felt empowered to speak up when they saw problems. Every month, I presented metrics to the management committee, not just deal volume and revenue figures, but recognition patterns, promotion timelines. Who was doing invisible work? Who was being overlooked? Richard loved it. He called it the organizational X-ray. Finally, a way to see what had always been there but never measured. Other managing directors started reaching out. Firms with similar problems. Talented people leaving because they felt invisible. Institutional knowledge walking out the door because nobody noticed who was carrying it. I started consulting. Just a few hours a month at first, then a formal advisory practice, then a conference presentation that went viral on LinkedIn. The Invisible Banker: How Firms Lose Their Best People Without Knowing It. 150,000 views in a week. My inbox exploded. People sharing their own stories. Directors admitting they'd made the same mistakes as Margaret. Partners asking how to implement similar programs at their firms. I'd spent 7 years being invisible. Now I couldn't escape visibility if I tried. But I maintained my boundaries. I still left at 5:30 p.m. I still took my weekends. I still refused to be the single point of failure for anything, because the real lesson wasn't that I was indispensable. It was that no one should have to be. The firm was designed wrong. We rewarded heroes when we should have prevented crises. We celebrated deal makers when we should have invested in deal infrastructure. We promoted people who took credit instead of people who created value. I was determined to change that. 4 months later, I received an email from Margaret. She'd been moved to a different group, one without direct reports. Not a demotion exactly, but a clear signal that her management approach had failed. Richard had given her a choice: take an individual contributor role or leave. She'd chosen to stay. Her email was brief. Victoria, I owe you an apology. I didn't understand what you were doing for the team. I didn't see it because I wasn't looking. That's on me. I hope your new role is everything you deserve. I'm learning a lot in my new position. about what it means to actually execute deals instead of just directing them. It's humbling. You made it look so easy. Now I understand how hard it actually was. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her sit in the discomfort of her realization, to make her feel what I'd felt for 7 years. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. That wasn't the leader I was becoming. The anger had faded, replaced by something more useful: clarity, purpose, a determination to make sure nobody else had to prove their worth by withdrawing it. Margaret had been a symptom, not the disease. The disease was a system that rewarded visibility over value. That promoted confidence over competence. That let invisible workers carry impossible loads, while visible workers collected the credit. I'd been part of that system. I'd enabled it by being so reliable, by never complaining, by always delivering. But now I was changing it. One overlooked analyst at a time, one transparent process at a time, one honest conversation at a time. I wrote back, "Margaret, I appreciate you saying that. I learned a lot from the experience too. About communicating my value, about not waiting for others to recognize what I contribute, about the difference between being essential and being seen. We both made mistakes. Let's move forward. And if you ever want to discuss what you're learning in your new role, my door is open." I meant it, truly. Because the best revenge isn't making someone suffer, it's making things better for everyone who comes after. 6 months after my non-promotion, I left the office at 5:30 p.m. on a Friday, a habit I'd maintained despite my increased responsibilities, because work-life balance wasn't just something I preached, it was something I practiced. The commute home felt different now. Lighter somehow. I wasn't carrying the weight of 100 undocumented processes anymore. I wasn't the only person who knew how to fix things. I wasn't indispensable. I was just excellent at my job. And that was enough. My daughter was waiting when I got home. Homework spread across the kitchen table, a finance textbook open beside her laptop. She'd gotten interested in investment banking after watching me work from home during the pandemic. "How was work, Mom?" she asked, looking up from her calculations. "Productive," I replied, setting down my briefcase. "The new mentorship program launched today. 38 analysts will get development opportunities they wouldn't have had before." She saved her work and turned to face me. "Like you didn't get? Children see more than we realize." She'd watched me work late for years. She'd seen the stress, the frustration, the midnight calls. She'd asked why I worked so hard when my director didn't seem to notice. I'd never had a good answer. Yes, exactly like that. She considered this for a moment. "That's a nice way to fix things. Instead of getting mad, you're making it better for other people." I smiled, recognizing the wisdom in her observation. Somewhere along the way, she'd internalized the lesson I'd been trying to learn myself, that the best response to being undervalued isn't anger. It's demonstrating your true worth so clearly that it can never be questioned again. And if they still don't see it, don't wait around hoping they'll change. Create the change yourself. That evening, as my daughter slept and I reviewed deal summaries for Monday's committee meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Partnership voted unanimously. "You're being elevated to managing director, effective next quarter." Margaret actually provided a supportive reference. Full circle. "Congratulations." I stared at the message for a long time. Managing director, the title I'd never dared to request. The title that seemed impossibly far away 6 months ago. I set the phone down, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. This wasn't about winning or revenge. It was about finally being seen, truly seen, for what I had always been capable of doing. The corner office with my name on the door was nice, but it wasn't the victory. The victory was changing a system that had failed not just me, but countless others whose quiet competence went unrecognized. The victory was creating paths for others to rise without having to become invisible first. I think about those first few weeks a lot. The discomfort of watching deals stumble, the anxiety of not jumping in to fix everything, the strange guilt of simply doing my job and nothing more. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and one of the most important. There were moments when I almost broke, when an email would arrive and my fingers would itch to respond, when I'd see a problem that I could fix in 10 minutes and know it would take the team 10 hours, when Margaret would look at me with that confused, desperate expression, and I'd want to just make it all better. But I didn't, because I knew that every time I rescued them, I was reinforcing the system that made me invisible. Every heroic save was another reason to keep me exactly where I was. The most talented person on the team, doing the most important work in the lowest position, because I was too reliable to promote, too essential to advance, too good at my job to ever move up from it. Strategic withdrawal broke that cycle. Not by resigning, not by complaining, not by burning bridges, just by finally, for the first time, letting the system feel the weight it had been putting on me. And that weight was heavy enough to catch the attention of people who could make changes. If you've ever felt invisible in your workplace despite carrying more than your share, I hope my story gives you courage. The skills that make you indispensable are the same ones that qualify you for leadership. Don't wait for others to recognize your value. Demonstrate it so clearly that denying it becomes impossible. But here's what I learned that I wish someone had told me earlier. Don't demonstrate your value by working harder. Don't prove your worth by sacrificing more. Don't make yourself visible by becoming exhausted. Demonstrate your value by letting them see what happens without you. Prove your worth by establishing boundaries. Make yourself visible by becoming strategic. Document everything you do. Not for yourself, for the people who come after you, so no one else has to carry what you carried alone. Train others constantly. Not because you want to be replaceable, because being irreplaceable is a trap. It keeps you exactly where you are. Ask for what you deserve. Clearly. Repeatedly. With evidence. And if they keep saying no, believe them. Believe that they've told you exactly how much they value you. And decide if that's acceptable. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the job is good enough, despite the lack of recognition. Sometimes the compensation is sufficient, despite the missing title. But sometimes it isn't. And when it isn't, you have options. You can leave. You can fight. Or you can do what I did. You can strategically withdraw. You can stop being the invisible safety net. You can let the system feel your absence while you're still there. It's not sabotage. It's clarity. It's showing them exactly what they've been taking for granted. It's letting the work speak for itself by letting the silence speak first. And if you found something valuable in this story, please like and subscribe for more perspectives on navigating workplace dynamics. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' inability to see it. It's defined by your impact, whether acknowledged or not. I spent 7 years waiting for someone to notice me. 7 years hoping that excellent work would speak for itself. 7 years believing that if I just did a little more, stayed a little later, delivered a little faster, someone would finally see. They didn't. Not until I stopped. Not until I let the silence speak louder than all my work ever had. Now I make sure no one at my firm has to wait 7 years. No one has to carry invisible weight until they break. No one has to prove their worth by withdrawing it. We see them now. We recognize them now. We promote them before they have to fight for it. That's the real victory. Not my title, not my corner office, not even my compensation. The real victory is knowing that the system that failed me won't fail anyone else. Not on my watch. If you're feeling invisible right now, I want you to know something. You are seen. Maybe not by your director, maybe not by your firm, but by everyone who's ever felt the same way. And if they won't see you, make them feel your absence, strategically, deliberately, without apology. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop making the invisible visible only for yourself. Let others discover what they've been taking for granted. Let them understand the true cost of overlooking talent. Let the system feel the weight it was never designed to carry alone. And when they finally see you, don't just accept the recognition. Change the system. Make sure no one else has to walk the path you walked. That's not just success, that's legacy. The paradox of invisible work is that the only way to prove it exists is to stop doing it. I learned that lesson the hard way. 7 years of invisible work, 7 years of being taken for granted. But now I make sure no one at my firm has to learn it at all. And sometimes the most powerful promotion isn't the one they give you. It's the one you create by finally refusing to be invisible. See you in the next video.